Hi cuties. We all heard the claim that Islam empowered women and gave them equal rights, and back in the days in Middle East especially, women used to be treated horribly until Islam came along to save them. Now if we go ahead today and look up any survey or study that has been done about women's rights around the globe, we'll see something in common with it. We'll always see that Islamic countries or countries with the majority of Muslims are always on the bottom of that list, along with North Korea for some reason. So we ask ourselves here, how come Islam empowered women and gave them equal rights, yet women are being treated horribly in Islamic countries or countries with the majority of Muslims? Today we hear the same repeated answers from Muslim apologists. They claim that the oppression of women in Islamic countries has nothing to do with Islam itself. It's just a culture thing. And apologists like Linda Sarsour or whoever this is, not only they claim that the oppression of women has nothing to do with Islam itself, they also claim that Islam gives women more rights than any modern society does. They go as far as claiming that Muhammad used to be a feminist who actually fought for women's rights. But that is of course wrong. To be honest, I can see how this could make sense to someone who knows nothing about Islam and takes a simple look at Muslim women in places like America, Canada, or Australia. And they seem to have rights there. They're not oppressed. They're not forced into wearing hijab. Even they voluntarily wear the hijab. They love to do it. They could also have some friends in places like Lebanon, Syria, Dubai, Egypt, even Iraq, and they see them on Facebook or Instagram. They're not wearing hijab, they're not oppressed into wearing it. So when I take a look at Pakistan or Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, yeah, Muslim women seem to be having it bad only in those places. So yeah, maybe it is just a culture thing and Islam has nothing to do with it. But that is far from the truth. The reality of this is that Islam has everything to do with the oppression of women in those countries and always has. And the slightly more modern places like where I come from, Syria or Lebanon or other places, it only seems that women have it a little better there because those governments are trying to slightly stay away from Sharia law and trying to implement a more modern, softer Islamic system into it. Which explains, by the way, why strict Muslims like ISIS or Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda, they hate us, they can't stand us, they call us infidels and traitors, just because we're slightly drifting away from Sharia law. And I repeated the word slightly a lot here because you have to know that women still don't have a good life at all in those so-called more modern places. They don't have a good life at all. I was a Muslim and I grew up in an Islamic community in Syria. To be fair, I never seen my dad hit my mom and she wasn't even afraid of him. In fact, we were afraid of her. You see this scar here? One time just because, actually I don't want to talk about it. So my mom and most of my female relatives, they had a good life. They had a decent life. But it wasn't the same for all women around Syria. And it sure as hell wasn't the same for all women in other Islamic countries or countries with the majority of Muslims. So I decided as a kid to look into it myself and see whether Islam has actually anything to do with this or not. Now to really know how Islam sees women, we need to read the three things: the Quran, its tafsir, which means interpretation, and the hadith. Those are the three Islamic major sources that everyone agrees upon, and Sharia law is based on those three sources. Now you have to know there's a lot of examples on those three sources only, so I'm only gonna pick what I think is the most relevant today. Example number 1. We read in Surah An-Nisa verse number 35, Allah says, men are in charge of women. That's by the right Allah gave to men over women and by what they spend. And the righteous women are the ones who devoutly obey their husbands. And of those women who you fear disobedience, you first advise them to stop. If they persist, you punish them to beds apart, which means withhold sex. Then you beat them until they obey you again. And when they do, seek no harm against them. Normally when Muslim apologists are faced with those verses, they get away by saying this has been taken out of context, so we can't really read it or understand it unless we read the tafsir, the interpretation. And they know that people are not gonna look into hundreds of books to find the correct tafsir of those verses, so they just get away with it. But I did. We're gonna go ahead and read the most trusted and respected interpretations in the Islamic community, which is Ibn Kathir. Sadly, I couldn't find Ibn Kathir in English, but since it's simplified Arabic that's reading of, you can just copy the whole thing from the link I'm gonna share, and you can translate it to any language you like and read. So we read the interpretation, and it's pretty simple like the verse says. Allah prefers men over women because they are better than women. That's why Allah gave the prophecies only to men, because they are better than women. By the way, this is a side note. Muhammad said once in a sahih narration, which means an authentic narration, he said, a people who make a woman their ruler, they will never be successful. This is a sahih narration from Muhammad. But let's go back to Ibn Kathir. The narration is very simple, like I said. It says, Allah prefers men over women because they are stronger, better, and because they spend money on women. So it only makes sense that women should be obedient to those men. And of those women who are not listening to you or not obeying what you want, you're allowed to advise them. Then you're allowed to punish them by withholding sex. then you're allowed to beat them into submission. And once they do submit to you, you seek no harm against them anymore, because Allah is grand. Now, isn't that very sweet? A study by Global Rights in Afghanistan, it says that more than 85% of women reported to be victims of sexual, physical, and psychological violence and forced marriages. And more than 60% have been victims to multiple forms of violence. Now, you don't need to be a genius to see the connection between this godly permission to beat women and the violence against women in the Islamic country. The Muslim apologist here will try to get away by saying there's something wrong with our understanding of those verses and words, because if you look back in time, you'll see that Muhammad empowered women and he was a feminist. So this verse doesn't make any sense. So we read in Sahih ibn Majah, the book of marriages. This is a Sahih narration, by the way, an authentic narration. Muhammad was given some random advices to his companions, and he says, "Do not ever ask a man why he's beating his wife, and do not go to sleep before praying the witr." This is some random wisdom from the feminists who fought for women's rights, saying, don't ever ask a man why he's beating his wife, and by the way, don't fall asleep before you pray. So, in another authentic Sahih narration, a woman wearing a green veil comes to Aisha. Aisha is the youngest wife of Muhammad. She comes to her and she complains about her husband beating her until her skin becomes green. So Aisha turns at Muhammad and says, "I have never seen any women suffering more than the believing women. Look, her skin is greener than her clothes." This is a long hadith, but I will be sharing the link in the description, so feel free to read it and see how at the end Muhammad doesn't punish the man for beating his wife until her skin becomes green. No, he claims that this woman has been a bad wife. So the question now is, if all of this happened at the times of Muhammad, a woman got beaten so bad by her husband her skin became green, and he doesn't punish the man for it, he claims that the woman has been a bad wife. And the mother of believers, Aisha, is named al-Mu'mineen, the mother of believers. If she told Muhammad that I have never seen any woman suffering more than the believing women, if all of this happened at the times of Muhammad, then when did Islam empower women and give them equal rights? Example number 2. When it comes to sexual incompatibility, any woman is allowed to talk about it and allowed to ask for compromises or just break up over it if the couple doesn't reach some sort of understanding. In other words, as a woman, you're not forced to do anything you don't like in bed. But in Islam, it's a little different. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 223, Allah says, "Your wives are a place of sowing of seed for you. So come at your place of cultivation however you wish." We don't really need tafsir to understand what this means. Your wives are a patch of grass for you. So come at your patch and put your seed in it however you like. But let's read tafsir anyway so people don't claim that I'm talking something out of my own mind. We read it Ibn Kathir. It says, when Muslims traveled from Mecca to Al-Madinah, they started getting married from women of Al-Madinah. And those women were Christians and Jews. But those men were used to all kinds of sexual positions with their wives. One in particular is what we call today the doggy style. Oh yeah. But women of Al-Madinah, especially the Jews, they refused to do this position. If you ask yourself why, we can read in Sahih al-Bukhari, it says, Jews used to say that if you come at your wife from behind, doggy style, then that wife shall deliver a crossed-eyed child. So that's why those women refused to do that position. So this problem was brought to Muhammad by his companions. And Muhammad called God, and God dropped a verse saying, your wives are a tilth for you, a patch of grass. So come to your tilth and put your seed in it however you like. So in other words, it doesn't matter what you like in bed. And it doesn't matter if you don't like the sexual stuff your husband is asking you to do. You have to do them, because Allah said that you are just a patch of grass for him, and he's allowed to come and put his seed in you however he wishes. I don't know about you folks, but that sounds pretty empowering to me. Now we all know what men can do to women if they don't listen to them. They're allowed to beat them. But what does God do when a woman doesn't listen to her husband? Well, we read in Sunan ibn Majah, the book of marriages, it says, this is a Sahih narration again. It says, when a woman annoys her husband, one of his versions in heaven says, may Allah destroy you, stop annoying him, for he is just a guest with you and soon will be joining us in the eternity. Here we have a perfect example of how male-made Islam is. Telling wives that if you annoy your husband, there is a version in heaven, one of his versions in heaven, praying that you be destroyed, and this version is harder than you, better than you, and loves him more than you. And soon, after he lives this temporary life with you, he'll be joining her along with the other versions he has. Talk about equality, bruh. In another authentic narration, Muhammad said, I am not leaving behind me any more harm to men than women. And in another narration, Muhammad said, if I were to command anyone to bow down to the other, I would command women to bow down to their husbands. That's by the special right Allah gave to men over women. This man is described today by Muslim apologists as a feminist. Can you believe that? Imagine if someone goes out, says all those things that we mentioned today and still be called a feminist. Right about now, we have a coherent picture of how those teachings are completely connected to the violence and to the treatment of women in Islamic countries. Because when the Prophet of Islam is saying all those things about women and sees women this way, why should we be surprised that his followers are doing the same? But we're not done yet. The last example. In countries run by Sharia law like Afghanistan or others, the woman's witness is equal to half of a man. In other words, in simpler words, the woman's opinion is equal to half of the opinion of a man. And this has horrifying ramifications for women living under those laws. Here's why. When a woman gets raped, she goes to the police and she reports it. She says, this guy raped me. So the police bring those people to the judge, the Sharia judge, and the judge asks a woman, did you get raped? And she says, yes, and this man raped me. So do you have any witnesses? She says, no, nobody saw us. Okay, so they turn to the man. Did you rape her? And he says, no, I never saw her my whole life. He wins the case because her witness is equal to half of his witness. Not only that, by reporting on rape, she admitted technically that she committed adultery. And the punishment for adultery in Islam is stoning. So in places like Afghanistan, if a woman gets raped and reported to police, she most likely gonna end up being stoned for admitting that she had sex. This rule comes from the Quran, from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282, where it says, and bring to a witness 2 witnesses of your men. And if there are no men available, then bring 1 man and 2 women of those who you accept their witnesses. That's for if one of them errs, the other one reminds her. If one of them forgets, the other one reminds her. This is the verse that says the witness of a woman is equal to half of it of a man. And if you ask yourself why, like a woman asked herself back in the days of Muhammad, in Sahih al-Bukhari, a woman came to Muhammad, this is again a Sahih narration, a woman came to Muhammad and asked him, why is this happening? Why is the witness of a woman is equal to half of a man? That's not fair. And Muhammad says to the woman, isn't the witness of a woman is equal to half of it to a man in the Quran? And the woman says, yes. And he says, that's because of a deficiency on a woman's brain. So according to Allah in the Quran and Muhammad, women are stupid and they have a deficiency in their minds, and that's why the witness of a woman is equal to half of it of a man. Again, why are we surprised by how his followers are treating women today? In a Sahih narration, Muhammad said to his companions, what interrupts a prayer is women, donkeys, and black dogs, if a man is praying without a partition in front of him. So women, donkeys, and black dogs, if they cross by, they will interrupt the prayer and he has to do it again. So his companions ask, why the black dog, O Prophet of Allah? They're surprised, why only the black dog? Why not yellow or red or something else? And he says, because the black dog is shaitan. In other words, it's Satan or the devil. Now, aside from the genius claim that the very color of the dog's hair determines whether he's a shaitan or not, aside from that genius claim, notice how the companions of the Prophet, nobody cared that women was included on the same list of donkeys, black dogs, and devils. No, they cared only about why the black dog. I think this paints a good picture to show us what was the value of women at the times of Muhammad. Everything I mentioned today is just a small example to what you can find if you read the Quran, the Tafsir, and the Hadith. This is just a misogynistic ideology. It is so male-made to the point that the author of the Quran actually forgot to promise women anything in heaven. If you read the whole Quran, you can see that it's just a misogynistic dream for men who get anything during life and they still get everything after death in heaven. Just go ahead and look up what the Quran promises men in heaven and you'll see. But to be fair, women were promised something at the end. In Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, we read, Muhammad says, I had a chance to look into heaven and I saw that the most of its people are the poor people. And I looked into hell and I saw the majority of its people are the women. In another Sahih narration, he explains why. He says, because women, they curse a lot and do not obey their husbands. And because they have a deficiency in their minds, they are stupid, they lack of intellect, which makes it harder for wise men to negotiate with them. And that's why they are the majority of the people of hell. So there you have it. I seriously do not understand how can anyone today claim that this guy used to be a feminist who actually fought for women's rights. Can you imagine the horror women have to live in those Islamic countries when those men are giving godly permissions and powers over women? Those men with the average IQ of 80 are told that God thinks that you are better than women And she has to obey you in everything you want, even if it's a sexual thing that she doesn't like. She has to do it. And if she doesn't obey you, you can beat her. And no one is allowed to ask a man why he's beating his wife. And if she still annoys you at the end, that doesn't matter, because one of your many virgins in heaven is praying so Allah can destroy your wife. The same wife who has a deficiency in her brain and is stupid. The same wife who Muhammad would order her to bow down for you if he could. And of course the same wife who interrupts your prayer just like a donkey or a black dog or the devil would. Those women who are at the end the majority of the people of hell. At the end, I would like to ask, do you actually believe that the oppression of women in Islamic countries has nothing to do with Islam itself, and Muhammad used to be a feminist who fought for women's rights? To me, the answer is pretty obvious. But keep in mind, not every Muslim on the planet follows those teachings or even knows about them. Many of them didn't hear about them before. But people who are running Islamic countries and demanding Sharia law day and night, they know exactly what those teachings are. They follow them strictly. And I know many cute Muslims will come and say, well, Qusay, you are using weak hadith, or you're interpreting things differently, or you're taking things out of context, and all of this nonsense. So what I would like to recommend is that you don't believe anything I said today. And don't believe, oh please, anything they say. Please go ahead and look up the information yourselves. All the links will be shared in the descriptions, and all the books can be easily found everywhere. It's not a hidden secret book I'm reading from. I'm reading from Quran, Tafsir, and Hadith. Because at the end, it doesn't really matter what I think, and it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is only the truth. Peace.